I love that methodology so much. It gives so much flexibility to that Torkoal to be able to do what it needs to do to help set up its teammates, but also enabling that it's not just there to be that particular role. You can have it safely in the back so that it can come and fulfill its potential maybe a little bit later on in the match. But Pokemon trainers at home, I hope you are seated. I hope you are ready. We are diving into the opening match of day 2. We're going to have the Dragonite and Garchomp, a double Dragon Fiesta out here front and center against a Dragonite and Jumpluff on the opposing side.
Oh, look at little Jumpluff there, Lou. Just amongst all of these huge big dragons there. Let's go, Jumpluff. Okay, so we're moving right, obviously, straight into this match here. Torkoal, if it's in the back for Luca, can obviously switch in here and Sleep Powder either of these targets, which will put a huge stopper to any of the offense that Dragonite or Garchomp can offer out here, except for the Lumberry that Victor has on that Dragonite, which will completely shut off that Sleep Powder option. So the Garchomp's probably a little bit threatened at the moment, especially if a Sleep Powder goes into that slot, and then the Dragonite on Luca's end can easily just scale shot either attack here as well. So, interestingly, the abilities on Dragonite is something we don't often see. We often see in focus, but multi-scale is on both of these Pokemon. But Scale Shot will get around that first bit of the multi-scale and then do the rest of the damage through it.
You kind of have to act a bit like it's a focus sash. You want to be able to give it that little bit of chip to expose its vulnerability through the rest of the game. And Intimidate coming through, but that's only really going to affect that opposing Dragonite, which is a nice play to come through here, knowing it's not that inner focus variety and will be affected by the Intimidate as the Dragonite decides to get all beautiful and bejeweled here as it goes into its flying Terra type, drops that Dragon typing, leaves itself potentially a little bit less vulnerable to any Ice type moves that could come through. Jumpluff is going to go for that Sleep Powder, but it's not going to be connecting thanks to the safety goggles that Incineroar is very fashionably wearing.
And there's Terra Blast with that flying. It's not too effective into the Jumpluff, it's just into the Dragonite. And look at that, with that multi-scale, it's taking that so well. And Scale Shot's coming out. 2 hits, 3, 4 maybe, and maybe 5, we'll have to see.
Well, did I say Ice type moves? I meant Dragon type moves. That's why you drop that Dragon typing. Make sure the Dragonite is going to be able to hang on as it's hit 4 times by that Scale Shot. Dragonite obviously taking a defense drop here as well, but going to be boosting up its speed, giving it maybe the opportunity to go for another Scale Shot in this next turn.
Exactly. So when you've got that boost, it's going to be really key. But obviously, Scale Shot has the downside of lowering its defense. So Victor's Dragonite at the moment does have extreme speed. So if it's powerful enough, it can target a streak speed into that Dragonite slot and maybe even get a KO at this point. And without it being inner focus as well, it's also not going to be able to take a fake out very well because it will still flinch at this point too. Whereas the Jumpluff can get away with it. It's got that Covert Cloak. It can go whatever move it likes right now. And this Dragonite is looking like it might not want to take a potential Encore if it's going to then lock into that Torkoal slot.
That's the thing, the Sleep Powder's null and void here thanks to the Lumberry and the safety goggles. The fake out coming through, I think this was the right target if it was that Dragonite still in play as the Jumpluff goes, okay, I can't put you to sleep, I'm going to boost up the speed on my side of the field and bring in my slow and steady little turtle to the match. Terra Blast flying type is going to come through from this Dragonite, connect down into the opposing grass type. This will do a huge chunk of damage, enough to get the one-hit KO.
That's a massive KO for Victor there. Jumpluff would have been such a thorn in that Garchomp side with all the Sleep Powders it could offer. But instead, that Typhlosion is in the back now, and so is that Dragonite, and Tailwind's just gone up. So in some ways, Jumpluff going down there is actually quite good for Luca, right? Because then you can suddenly make the most of 3 turns of Tailwind instead of having to switch out and then make the most of just the last 2 instead.
So I think newer trainers might kind of look and think, oh, you've lost a Pokemon, that's kind of a deficit to your playstyle at the moment, but actually being able to have that free switch and where your Pokemon can come in unscathed, free to be able to move in that next turn is a prime opportunity here. That Typhlosion just ready and waiting in the wings, like you said, could come into play, but instead Luca's going to bring that Dragonite back in. It's unintimidated, it's had its stats reset from that previous Scale Shot, and it's now in Tailwind. That means that it's going to be very formidable against something like the Dragonite, and at the same time, it could always try and go for, you know, that Scale Shot and get the knockout.
Yeah, it certainly can. Like, it's right in range there at the moment. Interestingly, we now have Torkoal in Tailwind. I don't know if it's going to be able to outspeed the Incineroar or not. Like, it depends on the training from Luca, but I don't even think that's even possible, honestly. But the good thing is Torkoal has massive defense, right? So it's going to be able to take on a lot of the attacks from Victor, possibly even just both into that slot as well. But it's going to be on Victor now to try and stall out this Tailwind, because at the moment Luca has all the power in the driver's seat, but Victor has the Pokemon advantage. So if Victor can play cleverly with the protects and maybe switching out, we can maybe stall this out.
Well, the Scale Shot's connecting down to the Incineroar this time, going to put a little bit of a dent into its armor. We've had 3 come down. Looks like even the 5 isn't going to be enough to get the knockout, but it is going to put Incineroar in a very vulnerable spot. All 5 are connecting here, and it's now down into that orange danger zone.
It's getting very close here. And let's see how fast this Torkoal is. Yeah, it's not faster than Dragonite. Okay, no surprises there. And where is it targeting though? That's the question. And Torkoal is actually taking quite a lot of damage from that. That's a lot of defense that Torkoal has. But there's the overheat instead, and it's enough for the Incineroar KO.
Love this double up down into the Incineroar. Sometimes you do see Incineroar just pivoting in and out of a match constantly, being really disruptive with those intimidates into your physical attackers like a Dragonite and applying that fake up pressure. And I think Luca identifying this is going to be an annoying threat that I want rid of. At the same time, Torkoal's getting out of there. Could this be Typhlosion's moment? It's the only Pokemon that can switch in now. And when it's on the field, are we going to see it shine?
Yeah, I certainly think we are. And it's going to have 2 turns of Tailwind to really make the most of this. And interestingly, Luca hasn't actually committed Terra yet as well. So if Luca really wanted to, we could see Terra, Fire, Choice Specs in the sun, Eruption coming out all over Victor's team, which would be incredibly, incredibly powerful. And yet King Gambit's coming in here, which is not really the Pokemon Victor wants to be kind of switching in here. It's Assault Vest. It can't Terra out of that Fire weakness either. So the best hope Victor has really here to kind of survive this turn is maybe hoping for the Terra Fire, maybe extreme speeding into the Typhlosion, but at the moment it's looking like this Typhlosion is exactly the position it wants to be.
Yes, and of course Victor now revealing his full hand of Pokemon as well, knowing that there is no Alola Ninetales in the back, meaning that the sun is going to be here to stay. Even if it ends, the Torkoal is in the back, it can reset that a little bit later on in the turn, and that's really good news for the Torkoal and the Typhlosion. And the Dragonite, I guess.
To be fair, something I haven't mentioned is the Sucker Punch on the King Gambit. That can really kind of help Victor out in the situation, to be honest. So might actually force the Terror on Luca's end, to be honest. But then that kind of leaves it open to the Extreme Speed at this point. So is Sucker plus Extreme Speed enough to do enough damage to be able to reduce these eruptions enough to the point that actually Luca might want to lock in a Heat Wave instead?
Well, you did say it was going to force the Terra, and the Terra indeed is shining right now. I think it's also to the benefit of being able to boost up offensively. Dragonite is not felled by the Extreme Speed, although that does a significant chunk of damage as the Sucker Punch comes through to be able to finish up the job. Typhlosion sitting in a prime position, though, with its full HP. If it's gone for something like an Eruption, this will be devastating, but no, go for the safer choice going. There's maybe a bit of priority here I don't want to contend with, and weaken my Eruption, and the Heat Wave gets the job done.
That's massive there. Okay, yeah, Heat Wave is still going to be very, very powerful out of this. So still a good lock-in for Luca, honestly. He's done a lot of damage there. But we're at this point now where there is 1 turn of Tailwind. This Garchomp in the back for Victor has Protect. It can Protect on this last turn of Tailwind and then suddenly offer those Earthquakes into either of these slots. So even though Luca's in Tailwind, but though with the Pokemon advantage, if Victor's trained his Garchomp to be faster than this Typhlosion, which is possible, Victor might actually have this locked up.
Oh, I mean, Garchomp is one of the Pokemon that fire types normally shudder in fear in front of. But as you said, Typhlosion and Torkoal both, particularly the Torkoal, has a really decent defense stat as well. And it's that 2v1 situation. If you take a closer look at the Garchomp, it does have access to that Earthquake, but instead, just going to go for the Protect, stalling out these remaining turns of field statuses that are happening at the moment. The Heat Wave coming through, but to no avail, that Protect is in play.
Yeah, so Victor did a really good job of just stalling out that Tailwind and preserving that win condition in that Garchomp right to the end, showing it is really, really good Pokemon right now, even though we saw a drop of it in the day 1 statistics yesterday, actually. So here is the Garchomp we were waiting to see. It is from Victor, and it's going to just be able to click Earthquake at this point. And with that Life Orb, it should just be enough to take this double KO here. I think what Luca just has to hope for is it's maybe not enough. Maybe Victor targets around and tries to go for maybe some Stomping Tantrums to be able to take this. But if I were Luca, I'd be thinking about what we need to do for Game 2.
That's the thing. Torkoal's weakened enough at this point. The Life Orb, as you've mentioned there, David, from the Garchomp, is going to be able to pack that additional punch behind the Earthquake. And in the face of 2 fire types, it is going to be a big amount of damage. You can see Luca actually is the player here, really taking every second. Is there an out? Is there any way that you can play around this? Or do you have to roll the dice on this Earthquake damage? It's going to be the Garchomp moving first. This is his move of choice because it will target both Pokemon. Torkoal actually going in for the Protect here, but Typhlosion exposed to take the full brunt of the damage, and it will get the 1-hit knockout as you predicted.
Yep, Typhlosion, his uniform is now down, and that is a very, very useful Garchomp to be able to do that. I don't know if it's guaranteed to be able to KO without that Life Orb, just showing how good that Life Orb set is on Garchomp, really. And interestingly, like, Stomping Tantrum is the same equivalent power as Earthquake into either slot, so there's no reason to Stomping Tantrum. You just want Earthquake at this point. There's no wild card or anything, so this Torkoal is very much going to be going down this turn too. So the question is, how does Luca kind of adapt for next turn? Do we see the same sort of thing, or maybe just a different sort of play with the same 4 Pokemon?
Do you know what? I think the 4 Pokemon were great, but I would have really liked to have seen the Typhlosion come back in due to that free switch from the Jumpluff rather than the Dragonite. Only because later we got to see that when it was in the sun and it was Terrafire boosted, that Heat Wave was able to get the knockout. And I feel like if the Typhlosion had come in then and been able to take more advantage of these Tailwind turns and not allow Victor the room to be able to stall them out with that Protect on the Garchomp, it could have given them the momentum to be able to get that damage on the board. You can see the Torkoal here just protecting in vain, knowing its time will eventually be up. It would take a little bit of a miracle for it to stall out all of these Earthquake PP turns, but I think it's a good opportunity here for Luca to actually start thinking about, hey, in that game 1, I was in a really good position. What went wrong and how can I adjust for game 2?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that Luca is thinking right now. There's that's a very pensive pose he's got there going on. So I don't blame him at all. Like, when you're up against Victor Medina, who has all of these accolades behind him, you really need to think about what sort of game plan you're going to do. But it really showed how Victor had a game plan and he executed it so well. Because even though it was kind of an obvious sucker punch into the Typhlosion on that particular turn to kind of get rid of that KO, actually, Victor identified much earlier than us that Garchomp was the key to this match right at the end. And so getting rid of that Dragonite, which would have been able to maybe take on some of those attacks a little bit better, go for those scale shots, was actually the one he needed to target down. So congrats to Victor so far. That's game 1 in the bag.
Yes, and talking about reactions of our players, you could see at the end of that match, just as it kind of closed out, confirmed Victor the winner, you could see the sigh of relief that he actually breathed there, because that was very close. There were so many opportunities for Luca to have been able to gain a lot more momentum in the sun, particularly considering that Victor didn't bring that Alolan Ninetales. There was no way of eradicating that sun, meaning the Jumpluff was always going to be in the position where it had the speed advantage, and the fire moves of Torkoal and the Typhlosion were always going to be boosted. I think going into the next game, if I was Victor, I might even try and shake up my Pokemon list a little bit more. Pokemon like the Alolan Ninetales, I know that I just want to see it, but I actually think it has a lot of play in this particular match. You disable the potential that this Jumpluff has. You can attack it with a lot of very strong Ice-type moves, as well as potentially setting up that Misty Terrain to stop any Spores coming through. You do have defensive capabilities to that Spore with the Dragonite and the Incineroar, like you were saying, but actually making sure that your other Pokemon are protected too could be very nice.
I mean, Luca's got 3 Pokemon that are 4 times weak to Ice.
Yeah,
so, that one, I'd have thought that would have been enough reason, but all those other reasons actually, yeah, I like that, Luke. Yeah.
You say the obvious, and I'll try and pretend I've got some extra points in there as well.
Yeah, the Ninetales look so strong, to be honest, just because of that. But yeah, if you've got the Torkoal in the right position, and because of the advantageous switch ability with that eject pack, Luca does have the ability to switch it in and out quite nicely for this. But then he's stalling out his own Tailwind turns at that point, so I don't know, I still think it is a nice option there. But Victor really does have to respect the sleep powder on that Jumpluff, so making sure you're bringing the Incineroar of the Goggles, the Dragonite with the Lumberry, I think are non-negotiable. You need to be bringing those every time. The Typhlosion, I think you need to be bringing every time as well. The King Gambit, I would say, is probably that kind of flex slot where you can kind of switch it out maybe for that Ninetales to shut off the sun a little bit more. But otherwise, I think it's on Luca to try and adjust for a different game plan. And I think when you identify bringing in that Typhlosion a little bit earlier, I think that would have definitely been the play too.
I think as well, I was a bit suspicious of Victor's Dragonite here because it's running a very unique set, isn't having any kind of Dragon-type moves on there either, so it doesn't apply a lot of pressure to the opposing Dragonite, but those Flying Terra Blasts put in some work, and Dragonite is back in action here for Victor Medina, paired up with that Incineroar once again, throwing down an Intimidate here, and Luca also bringing that Dragonite to the center stage with the Jumpluff once again.
Yes, we saw Victor lead the double Dragon last time, and then switch in the Incineroar in turn 1, but now it's just on the board straight away, which makes a lot of sense because this Dragonite, again, isn't in a focus. It can just be faked out this turn, and then the Jumpluff can be kind of effectively dispatched already. It can't protect itself, so you can just kind of Terra Flying Blast right into it, and the only thing, as we can see in the back, is that King Gambit that can take the hit, but then you're staring down the Incineroar, which has that Flare Blitz ability too, so great call for Victor to lead that Incineroar with the risk of it leading into a King Gambit, basically.
Almost wouldn't be surprised to see the Torkoal switch in here just to give Jumpluff the edge with this Chlorophyll ability to stop something coming through from this Dragonite. Maybe you can get the Tailwind up before you are felled by a flying Terra Blast coming through. Dragonite is going to be going for that Terrestrialization here once again, dropping that Dragon typing, meaning Scale Shot won't be as effective, and again can use that Terra Blast more effectively.
There it is, Terra Flying for that super effective Terra Flying Blast. It's going to do a lot of damage to whatever target it hits. Honestly, we've seen how much damage it does, even to a Torkoal, and there's the Scale Shot. Is it a miss? Oh, that's big one.
Completely misses there, allowing the Dragonite to freely go for this Terra Blast. It's going to find its mark actually onto the opposing Dragonite, do about a third of damage and break that multi-scale, leaving it more vulnerable. And Dragonite is followed up by the opposing knockoff, getting rid of that loaded dice. So Scale Shot already missed once. Now it's possibly going to be doing less damage going forward.
So Victor could have actually gotten a very easy KO on that jump lift there, but the downside of that is, as we say, if the Tailwind went up and the jump lift goes immediately down, then we've got Typhlosion with 3 turns of Tailwind, which actually would have been, yeah, as we kind of talked about in Game 1, quite advantageous for Luca. But Victor's actually playing quite smart here to actually leave that jump lift alone at the moment, because neither of these targets can be put to sleep right now, and as long as Victor doesn't click something that then can be then locked with an Encore, he's kind of safe to just kind of ignore it, really. Grass-type damage isn't going to do very much with Leaf Storm, right? So, effectively, this jump-off is a little bit useless sitting on the field right now. Like, Victor's very happy to Terra Blast and knock off, to be honest, on everything, and the loaded dice has gone on this Dragonite.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, actually. The jump-off was the fastest thing on the field anyway. It didn't need a potential Sunsetter to give it that boost to set that Tailwind up, and as we've had the sneak peek in the back, it doesn't look like Torkoal's even come to this match. The Extreme Speed going to go through into the opposing Dragonite, has 100% accuracy, and at the same time breaks that multi-scale, leaving it more vulnerable, but Dragonite could go for this Terra Blast into the Typhlosion and switched in. That was nearly a one-hit knockout. Not quite, though, but Incineroar once again is like, I've got your back. Here's the KO, and already Luca down a Pokemon.
Yeah, like an amazing kind of double target there. But it's also really safe, right? Like, there's no protect on that jump off, and Luca knows it's a useless slot. He needs to switch it out to get something back in, and there is the absolute punish as well. But even if he doesn't switch and lets it go down, that's still a bit of a punish anyway. It's still a stalling of a turn of Trick Room as well, and jump off can't come back in again. So just a really safe play, just advancing on that already good position that Victor has to double down into that slot and get rid of it. And now we're down to a Dragonite without its loaded dice. It's not offering a lot of damage. It's intimidated at the same time. And now it's probably all on this King Gambit now to deal the rest of the damage to the rest of the team.
I feel the Dragonite on Luca's side has lost his confidence a little bit for all those things you've just mentioned, and the fact the Scale Shot has missed. The Extreme Speed, yes, it's accurate, but it's not going to be dealing enough damage. I think you do have to maybe risk it a little bit and go for those Scale Shots, get that damage on the board. We saw how much 5 of them even did to the opposing Incineroar. At the same time, Luca maybe can try and switch it out and reset that Intimidate drop that seems to have been so detrimental, while capitalizing on the fact that you have this King Gambit on the field and we know how much damage it's capable of. It's actually the flying variant here, not going to be going for that extra damage with something like a Terra Dark, but lots of flying Pokemon in the air right now.
So there's the Extreme Speed into the Dragonite, getting it a little bit lower, perhaps into that King Gambit range, we'll have to see. But yeah, thanks to Tailwind, that Dragonite on Luca is definitely going to be outspeeding versus the Extreme Speed ties. But there's the Insurance follow-up, and yes, that is enough damage to KO this pesky Dragonite here, which is a really nice KO for Luca right now.
Yeah, really nice seeing that big damage that can come through from the Assurance, getting the knockout on the opposing Dragonite. The Dragons are out for the count in this particular turn. As the Flare Blitz comes through, obviously not going to be dealing as much damage thanks to King Gambit changing its typing, and Incineroar taking a little bit of recoil damage for good measure. The one issue for Luca now is you're down to your last 2 remaining Pokemon, however, and you've got this Jump Off on the field. Jump Off really cannot do anything to this imposing Incineroar, but Incineroar can do a lot back to it in return, and you don't have Terrestrialization anymore. That Jump Off was running Terra Water, but you cannot go into it for defensive support.
Yeah, and the Flare Blitz has just come out from the Incineroar, so you can't lock it into a safer move either.
True.
It's just going to be Flare Blitzing. And now Garchomp has come in here, and it's looking really, really strong, honestly. Obviously, the Jump Off still outspeeds this Garchomp at the moment and can put it to sleep, but there's not a lot stopping Victor just kind of going for Protect and Flare Blitzing into that Jump Off to try and get that KO. Question is Luca's Jump Off defensive enough to be able to take it? It's very specially defensive Pokemon, but physically not very much at all. And Incineroars have a lot of attack. I mean, Incineroar's a pretty good Pokemon. It's got great stats, so we'll have to see if it's enough. And there's a Leaf Storm. There's no Protect from the Garchomp either.
Oh, the thing is, you have to kind of ignore this Garchomp. It can't hit you with any ground type moves because both of them are flying. It can only really go for the Dragon Claw, so it's not the threat. But that Incineroar, as you said, David, is. So the Leaf Storm doing barely any damage, but is it enough with the stack up? No, Luca cannot get the job done. Incineroar can go for this Flare Blitz, and I love that it's targeting down the actual offensive threat on Luca's side, that King Gambit. It's only going to be a matter of time before Jumpluff is going to succumb to the same fate.
So I like that play from Victor. It was a pretty obvious kind of Protect from Garchomp there, just kind of stall out the last turn of Tailwind to be able to then dish out damage for the rest of the turn. But Victor doesn't allow it. He takes the game instead. He knows what he's got in the back. It keeps it nice and safe, keeps it away from crits, and Victor Medina takes round 10 of the Lille Regional Championships.
Huge congratulations to Victor. What a masterful play in the way that he was able to calculate exactly what his opponent was trying to do and